Hi guys, welcome back to the Social Tune and a new episode of Record Roundup. So, I feel like I need to give a brief explanation as to why I've been so inconsistent with videos lately. It's pretty simple. I've been on holiday. First I was in a place with no Wi-Fi, then I went to visit family, which is exhausting and takes priority over everything else whether you like it or not. But of course, while I was away, albums kept getting released and you guys kept requesting them. Which is why I'm really grateful that I have this series, as it will definitely help me to clear out as much of my back catalogue as possible. And even though I do have one artist whose entire discography I am going to be reviewing soon, I thought that it was only fair to you guys for me to knock out a couple of these first. So with all of that in mind, let's start things off with one of the most requested albums that I've got all year. You know, I once called myself a fan of Odd Future, and that was only to impress a girl I liked. Because in reality, while I have liked certain members like Earl Sweatshirt and Frank Ocean, I've never been all that enamored with the majority of what the label has put out. And one of the big reasons why is their leader, Tyler the Creator. Quite frankly, he's never really grabbed me on any of his records unless he was being shocking, and to be honest, even that got old pretty quickly. But while I was not a fan of his last album, Cherry Bomb, at all, this album was extremely different. In fact, it's had many people jumping on his bandwagon, claiming that they always knew that there was a genius inside him somewhere. Now, me, I'm not gonna go that far. Sure, Flower Boy is a great album, but it's great because it's unlike anything he's done before. See, one of the main reasons behind the hype of this album is that Tyler came out as bisexual right before it dropped. Now, is this a corporate move or is it true? Personally, I have no idea and I don't care. What I do know is that it does play a small role in this album's arc, but not an especially noticeable one. Which I honestly appreciate. It makes it part of a bigger whole. See, the album deals with an identity crisis and Tyler's depression, which he honestly pays great dividends to. Sure, it does run a little long, a couple of these tracks could have been cut and the album would have been fine, but the ones that do work really do stand out. The great breakdown of his fears on the Foreword track, the manifestation of everyone's perception of him on Who Dat Boy, which fits extremely well thematically, even if it doesn't sonically. Then you have the introverted tracks focusing on his own fear and depression on 911/Mr. Lonely and Boredom. The longing to be back in a mental space of happiness on November. And of course, the multiple tracks where he reaches out to a stranger on the phone, only for his message not to be recorded, in a moment of levity that is honestly really needed. And overall, this album really did strike me. It reminds me much more of a Frank Ocean project than a Tyler the Creator one, but that's honestly not a bad thing. Frankly, for me, this is one of his best albums, second only to Goblin, as it's getting a light 8 out of 10. Definitely a step in the right direction, Tyler. Keep it up.
After all this, I'm still just a kid on the internet. All I do is write about the men I'd like to meet, fantasies I had one night.
I almost didn't cover this album. Sure, I'd heard of Erik Taxon, and I'd got a number of requests to review some of his projects, but I just wasn't going to get around to it. But then this album dropped and a number of you guys went absolutely nuts over it, and don't pretend like you don't know why. Spectrum Pulse actually reviewed this and he happened to say something along the lines of, well, nobody else is going to cover this, which a number of you seem to take as a challenge. But strangely enough, what solidified my resolve to review this didn't have anything to do with the number of you daring me to do it. Believe it or not, Erik Taxon himself actually commented on one of my videos. He didn't even mention his album at all. So I finally actually checked out his channel, and somehow this guy has fewer subscribers than I do. So before I do anything else, I'm urging you to go subscribe to his channel. He puts out quality content. Seriously, if I had a work ethic like him, I'd be rolling in YouTube money. But anyway, I informed him that I'd be checking out Paul, and so here I am. And honestly, this really did surprise me. I expected a much more electronic project going into this, and in a way it is, but there are also plenty of lyrics where Erik Taxon takes the lead with a voice that isn't going to blow your mind or anything, but is definitely genuine and compelling in a way that I didn't expect. Now I will say, there are a tad too many electronic pieces here for an album with vocals. I understand that electronic music and experimentation is his forte, but the reason that I bring it up is because the songs with lyrics on this album are some of the best I've heard all year. His cover of Beauty and the Beast may have been a little on the quiet side, but the reserved nature of the track made it feel really charming and absolutely lovely. It's a beautiful cover, and then you have the amazing My Genre, where he meets this guy who sings in a thrash band, and while it's not his genre, he still appreciates it because he admires this guy that much. And the way he details the feelings that he's going through while speaking to this guy, and the simultaneous excitement and terror that the guy will find out his true feelings for him, is extremely sweet and touching. But the highlight of the album is easily Real Boy, where a teenage boy meets the first love of his life online, and while they may be miles apart, nothing has ever felt so real to him, no matter what society may say about it. And considering the way gay people are treated differently even to this day, especially teenagers, this could very well be based on true events. It's touching in the same way that animated short In a Heartbeat is touching. It's just so beautiful and innocent. So overall, this is a damn solid album. Like I said, the album itself may not be great as a whole, but some of the individual tracks here are some of the best I've heard all year. For me, it's an extremely strong 7 out of 10, and to you, Erik Taxon, I hope that you keep pursuing this sound, because it shows a lot of promise. Seriously, keep pursuing this angle and you will definitely make your mark. Okay, so one thing that I definitely need to say before continuing, and something that Erik Taxon should hear before he changes his entire sound for me, is that I'm extremely picky about electronic music. I like music to be complex and to conjure up emotions, which I occasionally find difficult for music that doesn't have any lyrics. But since so many of you were requesting that I check out this album that I missed earlier this year, I finally decided to make time for it. For those not in the know, Mr. Kady is a producer and artist from Austin, Texas. He's been making music for the last few years and has gained a bit of a cult following, especially after dropping his 2013 album Life. Now, before you guys spam me in the comments, I am well aware that a lot of people have referred to this guy's music as synth pop. The issue is that I've personally never been able to find that in his music. To me, he's always felt like yet another Swedish producer who makes Europop. But no, he's American, and from what I've heard, this is one of his most diverse projects to date, with a couple of obscure features and a pretty interesting sound. And to be blunt, I don't really get it. Again, I was promised synth pop and I got EDM. But again, maybe I just need to expand my definition as to what synth pop is. All the same, the project is definitely interesting with some standout moments. But ultimately, in the words of Erik Taxon, I can't say it's my genre. You've got a few highlights. Forget is fast and heavy with a pretty good dance groove. No Heart was warping and interesting in a way that definitely stood out. And Malformed, Lamentation and Crisis Point are all pretty emotional and passionate. But again, as much as the lyrics kind of reflect a robot trying to understand the concept of love, it's nowhere near as powerful as when Daft Punk did this on Random Access Memories back in 2013. Again, this is a good album, and I do appreciate the experimentation, but ultimately, it's just not for me, netting a light 6 out of 10. Check it out if you're curious, and look, if you're a fan of this guy, I hope you're not too offended by just how uneducated I am about this subgenre. But hey, how about instead of berating me, you just tell me why you like this album down in the comments below. I am very eager to be proved wrong on this one. So, you ever get that sinking feeling going into an album that you know is going to be bad? Yeah, it's part of the reason why listening to that AJR album earlier this year was so awful, as I could have so easily gone through life without ever having to listen to it. But I will admit, I did have a certain sliver of hope going into this project. See, unlike AJR, this is a critically acclaimed band who has released some great music over the past few years. And even though I wasn't a big fan of their last album, Reflector, I was definitely intrigued as to why their new album, Everything Now, was getting so much bad press. So I decided to cautiously dive in, and honestly, I didn't hate it as much as I was expecting. It's not a good album, but it is better than I expected, kind of like that Chainsmokers album that dropped earlier this year. And frankly, I'd take the worst of Arcade Fire over those guys any day of the week. And I say worst because overall, this is their weakest album to date. One of the main criticisms that I keep seeing for this album is that it's extremely mainstream accessible, even more than their last album. And one of the big reasons why this has pissed off so many of their listeners comes down to the themes on this album, where they blatantly criticize the modern age, consumerism, technology, selling out, when that's exactly what they're doing. And look, while it is hypocritical, there is a part of me that feels that it must be on purpose. If they had even a shred of self-awareness, this was all a put-on to prove a point. And as it turns out, Arcade Fire does have that self-awareness and is merely trolling their audience. The problem is that they're so overly cynical about it, and as someone who loves pop music and can think of a fair few great examples of bands selling out, this just feels extremely hollow to me. Now, there are some good songs here. Signs of Life, Everything Now, and Good Goddamn are all really enjoyable to me. But that's unfortunately counterbalanced by the terrible horns on Chemistry, or the synths on Peter Pan. And then you have the tracks that just don't make sense to me, like the two versions of Infinite Content. One of which takes stabs at folk country, and the other one at punk rock. Look, this album is just a mess of sounds, and it can't even be bothered to do half of them justice. Again, this isn't a bad project, but it's not good either, getting the lightest of 5s I can muster, or the strongest of 4s, depending on how you feel. But considering the talent behind this album, especially considering one half of Daft Punk helping out with the production, it really did disappoint me overall. I personally don't think it's worth your time, but hey, if you want something that's definitely worth your time...
Can't go wrong when it's straight from the heart, you can't go wrong. If it's a real bad, then you can't go wrong. Can't go wrong. Can't go wrong when it's straight from the heart, you can't go wrong. If it's a real bad, then you can't go wrong. When it's straight from the heart, the music gets hurt. Could have been a road man, could have been a nerd. That told me don't follow the herd. Instinct, yes, I follow the word.
So one of my most hated reviews on this channel to date is 1 Foot Out by the British rapper Nines. Now, I will admit, it's not one of my best reviews, and I do come off as a little dismissive in the video, but frankly, I stand by the 5 out of 10 that I gave that album. It's just not interesting. Maybe if you added some more grime, a lot more energy, got some better guests, and added on a little life experience, you could get something that's truly potent. This is that album. For those of you who don't know, Wiley is an underground rapper who's been making music in the UK since the early 2000s. He's become extremely popular over the past few years, especially at raves, for bringing fiery flows and especially for leading grime into its rise in popularity in the UK. So this is a veteran MC, a true gangster, who's already been arrested and stabbed multiple times, who's been referred to as the god and the king of grime. So if there's anyone who can convince me of the legitimacy of grime as a subgenre, it should be this guy, especially considering his rumored retirement very soon. And frankly, there are some albums on this list that I had to give several listens to before I decided where I fell on them. That was not the case with this album, because Godfather is just a string of banger after banger. I could complain that this album does run together a bit, or about the fact that it's 16 tracks long, but honestly, I barely notice because of just how hyped I am listening to it. It's amazing to me just how much energy this album has, never missing a beat, where even the mellower tracks had an undeniable passion to them that really did work for me. And look, the content is nothing all that special, but the presentation is what makes it more interesting. It deals with the usual cliches of him being the hardest MC, which he definitely backs up, and daring the competition to come after him, but he also implements the fact that he is a veteran, commenting on his age, his legacy, and how the old scene compares to the new one, especially with the rise in technology. But what I really do like is that he doesn't condemn the new scene, instead naming the pros and the cons. And it says a lot about how infectious his energy is that it passes on to every single guest on this album, every single one of whom sounds like they're hungry for the spotlight. If I were to pick out one song here that didn't really work for me, it would probably be Bait Face, which does feel a little too braggadocious and doesn't really have one of the strongest hooks. But on a 16-track album, that's a damn impressive ratio. So basically, I love this album, and as my first taste of grime music in a while, it's definitely left me hungry for more. This is how it's done, guys, and because of that, it's getting an extremely strong 8 out of 10. Fantastic work, Wiley. I'll honestly be sad to see you go. So, thank you guys for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. I want to release one more episode of Record Roundup before getting back to my full reviews, but things should be back on track soon. Otherwise, if there's any more albums that you'd like me to review, please post them in the comments or tweet them at me at The Social Tune, link in the description. Please subscribe so you don't miss a thing, and until the next time, I'm Finn, and this is The Social Tune, signing off.